Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is my immense pleasure to have the honor and privilege of moderating this panel about how we can support clean tech innovation and entrepreneurship in North Carolina. And I wanted to just very briefly set the stage, and then we have such an incredible panel. I want to spend as much time as possible hearing from them and hopefully getting a chance to engage you in the conversation as well. So entrepreneurship is thriving in North Carolina. However, there tends to be a focus more on other sectors outside of clean tech, like biotech, software, and there is a great deal more that we can do. We do have a vibrant community, but we really want to elevate it. So in this panel, we'll provide an overview of some of the initiatives, programs, organizations working in this space. We will get to hear from some incredible entrepreneurs themselves, and we'll discuss some challenges associated with connecting clean tech startups and entrepreneurs with the support they need to thrive here at home, and identify opportunities to better engage venture and other capital to foster the clean tech innovation ecosystem we would like to see. I will say that recently, the organization I work for, and if I am just going to backtrack a moment, my name is Deb Wojcik, and I have the privilege of serving as executive director of the Research Triangle Clean Tech Cluster. And where this is relevant is just recently, we hosted entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial finance, community, industry, government, and municipalities with an event called the Clean Tech Entrepreneurship Energizer to identify opportunities, challenges, and next steps in that space. And I see this as an amazing opportunity to continue that conversation and really figure out where we go next. So with that said, I am going to give brief bio introductions for our panelists and then have each of them introduce themselves and where they sit within this amazing, vibrant landscape. Damian Beauchamp, immediately to my left, is President and Chief Development Officer at 8 Rivers, a company who's created an entirely new power cycle that generates emissions-free electricity from carbon-based fuels for lower costs than traditional emitting technologies. I'm excited to hear more about that. He's a passionate entrepreneur, innovator, and chemist, and I had to leave this in, hell-bent on changing the world. Yes, absolutely, we need more of that, right? Specifically in the energy sector. He graduated magna cum laude from Kent State University and then joined the Ohio State University as a chemistry graduate student. And while he was there, he just couldn't stop the entrepreneurial bug. He kept developing new technologies and companies, and in 2016 left OSU to accept an offer to join the team at 8 Rivers, working to develop and commercialize industrial scale sustainable technologies with billion-dollar market potential. Damian, thank you for being with us. Krista Covey is president of First Flight Venture Center, a unique incubator for science-based startups located in the heart of Research Triangle Park. We are so excited to be neighbors and colleagues with First Flight. Krista has been supporting the development and growth of early-stage companies through her work building and leading award-winning innovation hubs in Florida, Texas, and North Carolina. Among many other engagements in the entrepreneurial landscape, Krista is a certified business incubation manager with the International Business Innovation Association and currently serves as their chair of the board. She holds a BS in business marketing from Southeastern University and an MBA from St. Leo University. Welcome, Krista. Trish Cozart is the director of the National Renewable Energy Laboratories Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center, an externally focused department whose mission is to build a clean tech ecosystem to empower market solutions that transform communities around the world. Within the center, Trish manages the Wells Fargo Innovation Incubator, a $50 million program dedicated to speeding early-stage clean tech companies to market. Trish is a bachelor's graduate of Colorado State University and a Master of Science graduate from the University of Colorado, Denver. Thank you for joining us, Trish. Mariliis Holm is co-founder and partner of Sustainable Food Ventures. She is a food scientist, entrepreneur, and investor. As the co-founder and partner at Sustainable Food Ventures, an early-stage venture capital firm, Mariliis backs founders building the future of cell-based, plant-based, and recombinant food. Before founding SFB, she was the head of food science at Finless Foods, a biotech venture company creating cell-based seafood and fish. Mariliis also co-founded Nonfood, a startup that is creating sustainable foods based on algae. She's a graduate of Tallinn University of Technology, Technological University Dublin, and Agro Paris Tech. Now, I don't know about you, but I am so amazed by these amazing experts on this field, and I cannot wait to hear from them directly. So I'm going to put this away and let Damian tell us more about his work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Deb, and thanks to the conference for the invite to join the panel. I've been coming to this conference for about 5 years now, since basically I moved to the area, and I work for a company called 8 Rivers, based in Durham, founded in Durham, founded by a native North Carolinian. And at 8 Rivers, we develop large industrial scale technology to decarbonize all sectors: power, hydrogen, cement, chemicals. We focus on the hard to abate areas. I'd like to kind of frame us as the world's largest net zero solutions provider. We look at ways to consume today's commodities and produce today's commodities, but in between, inherently capture any emissions associated with the conversion of those commodities. We've raised over $1 billion across our platform over the past decade and a half, and created over $2 billion in market-based value. One of our subsidiaries, Net Power, which a lot of people are aware of, is going public at a $1.5 billion valuation in the next month or two. So for a small firm founded in North Carolina a decade and a half ago, you know, we've created a quote unquote unicorn, and we have a lot more coming out of that. In addition to technology development, we focus on project development, so deploying large scale power facilities, hydrogen production, ammonia, direct air capture. We have somebody else from 8 Rivers joining kind of the carbon removal portion of this conference as well. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone, and congratulations on the success of the company. Amazing. And Deb, I have to say, the Energizer event was awesome.
Thank you.
So can't wait to continue the conversation. So again, my name is Krista Covey. I'm the president of First Flight Venture Center. First Flight is an innovation hub. And as Deb mentioned, we are in RTP. So we've got a physical location with offices, labs, and a community of support for innovators and entrepreneurs that are changing the world, many of which are here today. So we focus on serving what we call high science, high tech, high impact startup companies from concept. So perhaps folks that are working at a university in a lab come up with some type of idea and say, boy, I think this could change the world. But business is a whole different language. We help folks learn the language of business. So from concept all the way through commercialization and beyond. And so again, I mentioned that we're an innovation hub with a business incubator. And our business incubator typically has 30 to 40 resident companies that are changing the world every single year. And we've been around for over 31 years now, which is kind of unique for a business incubator. And out of those 3 decades, we've graduated over 400 companies, one of which is right here. So Sue Meekum with Membranes is one of our graduates. So she's changing the world with membranes for reverse osmosis systems. So clean tech, clean water. So these 400 graduate companies have contributed about $12 billion in market capitalization for North Carolina and beyond. So creating new jobs, solving big problems. So we want to continue that work. But we serve hundreds of companies across North Carolina every single day. And this is through our virtual programs, business education, resources. So we provide mentoring, we provide access to capital, and we provide a network. And so I'm happy to talk about some of those programs or how we do that specifically, but ultimately it's to enable innovation and entrepreneurs to be as successful as possible on their road to success. So thank you.
All right, I guess that's me. Hi, everybody. I'm Trish Cozart. I'm the director of NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, that is NREL. They're Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. So as Deb described, we're a center that's externally focused. So we're really looking to build up the clean tech ecosystem around the work that's done in clean energy and beyond, and work with companies. So we do really three things in our center. We build networks. So we build networks of entrepreneurs. We build networks of incubators, accelerators, and others around the country working in clean tech. We build networks of investment that's happening in clean tech. So we know a lot of people, and then using NREL's convening power, we convene those people through a variety of events or different types of gatherings that we feel will help connect those people together to move the market in the ways we want it moved forward. And then the last thing we do is we construct programs, mostly technology incubation programs. And we do this with private partners as well as public. So it's not only funded by the Department of Energy, but as Deb described from Wells Fargo, for example, Wells Fargo's foundation has put $50 million into a program we have there called the IN2 program, or the Innovation Incubator Program, which was built really to fill a gap and help de-risk technologies and propel them towards commercialization. And we do that by providing technical assistance using the billions of dollars of taxpayer money that's gone into the facilities at the Energy at the national lab to help those startups move forward, and pairing them with experts there. So that is one way that we do that, and happy to talk more about what we do after we do these intros.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Deb, for inviting, and thank you, everyone, for introducing themselves. It's a real pleasure to be here. This is my second year only. I was last year in a much smaller room, felt cozier, but this is great too. My name is Mariliis. I'm the co-founder, one of the two co-founders and partners of Sustainable Food Ventures. We invest in the future of food, and we, as Deb said, we invest across three technologies: plant-based, cell-based. Cell-based is also known lab-grown meat in the media, who is not familiar with the term, cell-based meat, and then recombinant technologies. But lastly, recently, the fungi people have been starting to say that they're their own kingdom, so they want to be mentioned separately. So we do that as well. And we started in late 2020. And in the last 2 and almost 2.5 years, we've invested in 53 companies across the globe. We've invested in 6 different continents and 20 different countries, so we're very global. However, we've made 8 investments into the local ecosystem. Some of the founders are homegrown, so they grew up in here and started the companies here. Some of them were brought in from all over the world. And last but not least, we're very early stage investors. So half of the time we've been the very first investor to the company, even before the family and the friends. So that's how early we invest. And our check sizes are relatively small. They're $50,000 to $150,000. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2.5 years, and we'll continue doing for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for introducing yourselves and the work you're doing right now in the space. Just to follow on from the keynote, we just heard from Dr. McCoy about the federal government's role in financing our climate future. I think this is a great entry point because we need money to do this work. Can we talk about both federal and state support? What has the government done well in supporting innovation and entrepreneurship? And what are some of the obstacles you've seen? Krista, do you want to start?
I'd be delighted to. So one of the things that we've seen that has been a benefit for innovators and entrepreneurs is the investment into SBIRs and STTRs. So last year was the 40th anniversary. We weren't sure if this was going to be an opportunity going forward. So it was a little nerve-wracking. But when you're working with innovators and entrepreneurs that sometimes have a very long runway, it takes many, many years to get to market. And you're not always going to get access to traditional sources of funding, angels, ventures, other. The federal funding that comes through SBIRs and STTRs can be critical. So SBIR is a Small Business Innovative Research. So there are federal agencies, I think 11, that have over $100 million in their budget. So 3.2% of that has to be allocated to SBIRs, and then there's the STTRs, which is the same thing. It's a technology transfer, but that's tied to a university. So there's 3 phases of funding. The first phase is about $250,000, roughly. The second is about $1 million, and then phase 3 is market or commercialization. But this is critical. So having this non-dilutive funding available to our innovators and entrepreneurs who are truly out to change the world. They've got big ideas, big solutions. They need that funding to make it through that initial valley of death to market. So I'd say that's something that the government has done really well, is continued with the SBIRs and STTRs. What can they do more of or better? More funding, right? So we've seen a lot of, there's been a ton of additional funds from the federal government, that we've seen over the past couple of years, which is significant and wonderful. We need more of that. And we also need to make sure that it's equitable, right? So everyone has access to these funding opportunities. And our job together is to make sure that folks are educated on these opportunities. They have the resources and capability and the wherewithal to be able to apply for and win this federal funding.
I agree that there could always be more money, not just private money, but government money. But something that my partner from Sustainable Food Ventures, Ryan Bethencourt, said yesterday in this stage, sitting exactly here, was that something that North Carolina as an innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem could benefit from is removing the non-competes. So kind of following suit from California, that because if you do implement non-compete removal to an ecosystem, that means that you can compete with your previous boss, which means that like you can do better and then your next employee can compete with you. So the way it fosters innovation and I would say healthy competition is just more powerful than keeping those minds in one big organization versus like really letting people go wild with their ideas.
Would anyone else like to comment?
Happy to chime in on this one too. Totally agree with the SBIR as well. Maybe I'll start with the negative first and then end on a positive note. So I think some of the ways, I think communication is something that can be improved on how to get access. We get calls all the time of, where do I get some of this money that has just come? We hear there's billions of dollars. Where is it? How do I actually get access to it? And I think the government, generally speaking, can do a much better job communicating where that is and where it's going and who can get it and all of those things as well. Another thing is, and we heard it talked about earlier with the EPRI folks, and others is permitting. I think just there's so many regulations that have just for good reason have come down. There are barriers to doing things quickly. And so that's an area that can be worked on to help entrepreneurship, especially. I think some of the positive things besides the ones that were already mentioned, and we just heard it mentioned in the keynote, was the prize program is actually a really simple way to get some cash to startups. That's actually run through NREL. That prize program, the American Made Challenges program, is run out of our offices and has been working really well in deploying quick capital to startups. Another program that's great through the National Lab System is the TCF program, which is Technology Commercialization Fund. So if you're a startup, you can actually get together with an expert at the labs, and it's a cost share. So you put in a little bit of money, that same amount's put back into you to work on a project at the lab, help validate your technology, get over that valley of death you're talking about. So that's one other way.
And Trish, before we go to Damian, I just wanted to also, since we have students in the room, talk about earlier stage when you're a student, the Energy Tech University Prize competition that came up yesterday. We were very proud as RTCC to be the South Atlantic regional convener, where students actually build business plans around commercialization for high impact technologies. And it is absolutely inspiring. So the national competition is this coming Monday. You can, if you are not already on the RTCC subscription list, we will be posting the link and you can watch it virtually. And then students really, we put out the call in the fall. And I hope we're still selected next year, but it's our second year running and it's only been around 2 years. And it is a fabulous way to engage with the technologies coming out of your lab or coming out of the national labs. And it's incredibly well run with a lot of money behind it. Damian has been one of our amazing judges. And you know from his resume, he knows how to judge this stuff. It's incredible to have that kind of expert also evaluating your business proposals.
Well, I think also, and this is where I was going to go. So the DOE's been running this kind of pitch competition for a long time. And in addition to judging it, I won in 2015. And that's ultimately, that program was really the launching pad for my whole career. So for students, I think that's a huge thing that the government can continue to do. And along the lines of, more funding, I think that with the IRA passage, there's, oceans worth of funding, and it's doing its job in pulling capital from international markets back into the US, and we're seeing that happen right now. So I think that they've been hearing that call to action and they've stepped up, surprisingly. But the pitch competitions, I think, one, should probably be run twice a year. 2, the prizes should be much larger for these students, at least to carry them. A couple individuals be able to pay payroll for 2 to 3 years to support them as they continue to compete. But there are a whole host of those. I think the other thing that could be really good is to remove the business names and the applicants coming in on different grant opportunities. Human bias is inherently present in evaluating these things. And I've seen it myself over 7-8 years at 8 Rivers now, where if your network is strong and you've built a network and those people in your network from various universities get these positions in the DOE, inherent to their decision-making process is that they're going to choose, 1, people that they know because they don't want to fail, and 2, they tend to choose larger organizations because they don't want to fail. So inserting the ability for the various bureaucrats and government officials to fail with, having deployed funding and something not working out should be supported, and removing the bias by not seeing who the applicant is, but judging on the merits of the idea, the business plan, and the opportunity, and then revealing who the applicant is, I think is an interesting approach that could also be inserted. The other thing that's been really great is the opportunity zone piece. So I'm always interested in ways that the government can reduce or provide tax benefits to private party capital coming into startups. That's the other way to incentivize a more market-based approach. And so those are, in addition to what's been covered, that I think are pretty interesting concepts.
Did you want to follow up, Trish, or are we okay? So Krista, I'm going to come back to you. So a lot of your work, both at First Flight and in your previous roles, has not just been about helping individual entrepreneurs, but building the supports that lead to a stronger, more vibrant innovation and entrepreneurship ecosystem. What have you identified as critical components to fostering strength at that ecosystem level?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm an ecosystem builder by heart. And it means that we have to have dialogue and conversations and talk about opportunities and challenges together. So it really is the floating or the rising tide floats all the boats, right? So if we can have partnerships, collaborations, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we can say, here's the goal, here's what we want to see happen. How can we work together on this? And sometimes, there's some feathers that are ruffled a little bit, but eventually you get to the point where you can have open conversation and build trust and feel confident that you can be open and honest with this other person. Could be an organization that's an entrepreneur support organization, could be a university, could be a municipality, could be someone that believes in clean tech and supporting our innovation and entrepreneurs. And it takes a while, but eventually you can get there. So I think the main thing is having a goal in mind, right? We can all agree that supporting innovators that have the solutions to big problems and entrepreneurs to get these solutions to market is a good thing, right? So how can we work better together? And so again, I think it just starts with that initial conversation. We also have to make sure that we're approaching this conversation, this open dialogue with diversity, with different lenses, right? So we all get comfortable, and I really like your comment earlier that we have to make sure that we're not, we have to be aware of the biases, right? And we have to make sure that we're talking to folks at different levels that support entrepreneurs and innovators in the ecosystem. So from the early, ideators, all the way up to very successful, companies and founders or serial entrepreneurs, right? They've been doing this for many, many years, and all of the folks that support them. So again, that's different perspectives, different communities, right? Making sure we're talking to founders and other stakeholders in rural areas, underserved areas, minority founders, minority leaders, different folks that have different opinions and different lenses on things. I think that's how we get to the point where we can have substantial conversations and move the needle.
Thank you. And I will say from my own experience, Krista, Emil, and the First Flight community is an amazing collaborator. So thank you for your leadership in that space. Trish, I have a similar question for you. What does your center see as fundamental to effectively supporting innovation and entrepreneurship? How do you at the center focus your efforts and resources to maximize the benefits you provide and the chances of launching successful new technologies and entrepreneurs?
Great question. I'll try to answer that. I think fundamentally it's when we do create programs, we actually think long and hard about why we're creating it and that it has to be filling a gap that is not already being filled elsewhere by the private sector or somebody else. So how can we use the resources at the national laboratory that actually is very helpful to somebody else and can be helpful to other incubators or other startups. So that's key in just the strategic thinking there. And then utilizing what we have at the lab. When we do get applications in to join any of our programs that want to participate and have that rare opportunity to work with these experts and this millions of dollars of equipment that we have there, the first thing we do is put a bunch of technical people in the room. And to your point of bias, and we don't look at the company names, we look at the technology, and that the very first pass through the gauntlet of down selection is the technology itself, with a bunch of researchers around a table debating whether or not we can help them, number one, at the lab. That's the first test. And then also, is it something that's actually novel that's got potential with what they know? And that's how you get past gate number one, before we even look at the business and the company and the team and all of that.
That's great. So Damian, your experience as an entrepreneur, and I am in deep admiration because I do not have the risk tolerance for it. So already we're starting out. You have insights that many of us, including myself in the room, don't have. What external supports or resources have been most valuable to you as an innovator and entrepreneur? And if you have any specific examples, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah. So going back to the previous comment that I made on the DOE Clean Energy Business Pitch Competition, this has been a theme that's really come of age across all of the universities. I think nearly every university has these pitch competitions, and for young entrepreneurs and people who are interested in this, I think those are some of the best resources. I personally think I got a better education in how to grow a business in actually just engaging in those competitions. I'm a chemist. I never took an MBA class, but I learned all that in situ because I had to through that process. And it kind of gives you the appropriate mentality of sink or swim. So you have to figure out how to create a value proposition or determine if you even have a value proposition that's compelling enough to have something that's marketable to a customer or a group of customers or a market in general. So that's one. Two, obviously, all the grant funding that is available and SBIRs and the like are obviously wonderful drivers for our economy from the government to help support that stuff. Two or three, I would say, building networks is extremely important. So being aggressive enough and ambitious enough to go out and meet new people. And when you're at conferences like this, I always spend less time in the rooms and more time in the open spaces and going up and talking to people. But growing your network is probably one of the most important things. And through doing that, you'll meet other entrepreneurs and mentors like I have, who really help guide you and make additional introductions. And it's just the constant working of that I think brings you to new opportunities. But it's an endless cycle. And you have to have a tremendous persistence and a risk tolerance that apparently is inherent to me, but I've been told by many isn't inherent to everybody, which is surprising to me. But yeah.
Well, and I think, again, to the students in the room, I used to wear a hat that was a career coach. I directed the Career Center at the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke, and yes, Duke. And I think that networking piece, right? If you think about it not as a transactional part of what you do, but about building relationships and finding connection, that is where you can find those mentors and the inspirations that take you to the next level. And you will lean into your studenthood, right? There are many people out there that want to help students. So really do whatever you can to lean into that and make it a habit now, because as Damian said, it will serve you throughout your career, and it's not something that you can let go stale. So thank you for that. Mariliis, I'm going to come down to the other end of our panel. You have experience both as an entrepreneur and an investor. And I would love for you to put your investor hat on for a moment. And what has worked well in terms of investing, especially those early stage, like you talked about, before even friends and family, those local founders and managing an early stage venture fund here in North Carolina?
Deciding which part to tackle first. But I would say that when we started the venture firm in 2020, it was deep COVID. And we actually moved from California to North Carolina very purposefully. And actually, at the time, a huge financial innovation came out from AngelList, which is our backend, which allowed basically smaller venture firms come online, and we operate as a subscription model as a venture firm. So this is something very new. So we operate on a quarterly basis, and having that backend that allows us to fundraise globally, and having COVID that allows us to work from anywhere also allowed us through our backend to invest anywhere. So it almost didn't matter from the business perspective per se at the time where we operate from. But for the industry we're in, which is food and biotechnology and like the big categories, we chose here North Carolina as our home base and office base. And the beautiful thing with investing into the local companies is actually how easy it is to attract them to move here. So one of our success stories in terms of moving here is Tiamat Biosciences. So they are Tiamat Sciences. They are based in the Alexandria launch labs in RTP, and they moved here from Belgium. So 2 founders, 2 kids. They were originally going to Silicon Valley, and we just kind of like, hey, have a look at Zillow for like 5 minutes and then see like, what do you want to do? So that was like clear for them, and they moved here. And then, of course, the talent that is available here. And for a startup, I mean, for every one of us, time is our only resource, right? But then when you're a startup, your runway becomes your biggest peace of mind. And it's really 2 to 3 times longer here in North Carolina than it is in the Bay Area. So it's not a hard sell for me to convince people to start their companies here. I don't know if I tackled all parts of the question, but those has been the good things in terms of being here. And also, I just love it here. I grew up in Estonia and I've lived in like 6 different countries in the last decade. Personally chose to do that, so no one forced me. And I really found home here. It's like when I first moved and drove around, and I didn't drive, but I showed my mom on the phone like where we are. She was like, "Are you surprising us? Are you in Estonia? Like, are you here in half an hour?" I was like, no. This is how similarly beautiful North Carolina is to where I grew up in.
This actually is a nice, I was on a panel yesterday about foreign direct investment, and it was basically North Carolina cheerleading session, right? It was like, wow, there are reasons why we're getting those investments. Companies from Belgium and all around the world are joining us here. Mariliis, I am going to keep it with you for just a moment and flip the question. So on the other side, what have you found to be the biggest challenges as an investor in the clean tech landscape, and what would help you do more or better?
Yeah, so I'd say 2 things. So I've noticed compared to living in Silicon Valley and then here, early stage capital availability is much, much, much smaller than it's there. Like even though capital has gone to cloud because of COVID and everything, it's still significantly different here versus there. I think the later stage investments are pretty global in every sense, but specifically early stage funding was more difficult. Here you would find more programs that are no capital involved, just like equity, support, services, mentorship, things like that. And then the other thing I think it's very interesting. So when I started North Carolina Future Food Coalition last year in September, together with the NC Biotech Center. And when I'm trying to get students together from the 3 different universities, they won't kind of hang out with each other. So I'm like, what is this thing? But on that note, though, UNC the Chapel Hill Alt Protein Group and Duke Alt Protein Group are coming together 14th of April to do a full-on day about the future of food, and they'll have a pitching competition and they'll have phenomenal speakers. So bringing down the silos on a university level, but then also on an industry level, and then also on the cities level, and then you could go bigger to states and all the things, and then globally. I think that's a fascinating challenge to have.
Probably easier outside of basketball season. Damian, as an innovator and entrepreneur, what have you found to be your biggest challenges when you are looking for support to launch new ideas and products? What's missing or not enough? And what do you wish you had that you didn't along your path?
I don't, that's a hard question for me because I've never really been one to focus on the challenge. I always believe that there is a solution, and that if you do have an innovation or a business that's solving a problem, that as long as you're persistent enough in pursuing that you will find you will find the help that's needed. It takes a tremendous amount of effort, but if I had to get more specific, probably the best thing once you have some money you can invest in is good lawyers. They will really help in the long term. For young entrepreneurs, the protection of your equity is probably the most important thing in ensuring that you maintain control of your business and your IP. Those are 2 critical things that were kind of more things that I learned in the process. I would say with government funding, with all the incubators that are out there, I think those are some things that have really, they're much better today than I think they have been in the past. At a certain point, and this might be a little controversial, when I first joined 8 Rivers, I asked if they were an incubator because I didn't want to join an incubator. I'm a very pure entrepreneur in that I believe that entrepreneurs should be in the market and they will either live or die based on their abilities, their desire, their persistence, and the merits of what they're bringing to the market. If it has value, like a light bulb, they'll go everywhere, right? And so if it has merit, it will find, the market will come to work with those companies. And so it's also recognizing when to kill an idea as well. And sometimes those resources are hard to find, people who can give you the advice that maybe that idea isn't the best one to pursue, and not have, constant support of yeses all the time, right? You want to have a lot of people who will be critical and tell you the truth. I think those are important. I think access to capital, one of the most important things that I've seen at 8 Rivers is our ability to be able to travel globally, to be able to span international markets, and through that we've been able to access different kinds of capital, who has different companies who have different visions, and that's a constraint for early entrepreneurs that I'm not sure how to solve the funding around being able to get access to travel that much, but that's a key piece, is being able to get in person, go to New York, go to London, go to Abu Dhabi, go to Tokyo, be able to get around to those international markets. Maybe there's another solution there around supporting entrepreneurial travel in the early days. I don't know, but just kind of speaking off the top of my head, these are some things that I've personally seen. But I do believe that there is a tremendous amount of capital that always wants to get put to work, both private and public based resources. I don't think it's a limit of cash.
Yeah. And just going back to what Trish said earlier, sometimes there is a navigational challenge. How do I access that? And that's where the persistence that you spoke of really comes into play, and the longer runway, right? That Mariliis talked about. Krista, the research triangle is known for our strengths in biotech. You mentioned the Biotech Center. I have great colleagues over there. First Flight works with a lot of those startups in that space. What can the clean tech sector learn from other technology-focused sectors like biotech? What should we be doing or thinking about that we're not already?
So, and yes, North Carolina Biotechnology Center is a wonderful partner and collaborator. But this is a great question, because just like biotech, so think, in the life sciences, biotech specifically, take it down even further. If you're in the pharmaceutical space, drug development, diagnostic, you're looking at a very long runway, right? Years, maybe a decade or more to actually get to market. Why? Because you most likely have to go through the regulatory process, which can take forever. So I encourage you to think long-term, right? You're going to most likely have to go through some type of regulatory process, which can take years. So how do you survive? I'm going to mention there's the runway, but then there's that valley of death, right? So you've got your research and development over here, and then eventually get to a prototype, and then hopefully you'll get some early adopters and maybe into market. So how do you make it? So you want to think through, okay, non-dilutive funding, protecting your ownership. What other funding opportunities might I find? Maybe that's angel, maybe that's venture, maybe that's other private capital. Diversifying your portfolio. Another strategy that a lot of biotech companies employ is that they have a platform, right? So maybe one is revenue positive over here, and you're waiting for your R&D or regulatory approvals over here, right? So one side can fund the other. So again, it's all about thinking ahead for the long haul. How am I going to get through, potentially years and years and years of hard work, effort, energy, till I finally get somebody to give me cold, hard cash for my great idea, right? The other thing to think about is collaborating and getting stakeholders to buy in early on. So making, this could be a private public partnership, some type of relationship, maybe with a university, again, municipalities, economic development organizations. And I would absolutely encourage incubators, accelerators, and other entrepreneur support programs. I do know for a fact that incubation can be helpful to many clean tech and biotech companies. We know from years of research that less than 20% of companies, startup companies, will make it to the 5-year mark. The 5-year mark is critical because that's when you have more sustainable jobs. You have a pretty clear business model and a business plan at that point. And 5 years is a good benchmark. But the failure rate is not good, right? 87% of companies, however, that are in an incubator are successful after 5 years. That's a great statistic. And in fact, 84% of those successes are staying in the community that housed them. So that's good for your local community. That's good for economic development. And so I do encourage you to find that support network. And whether that be, if you have an incubator in your area, wonderful. If not, there's probably some type of entrepreneur support organization. And I'm happy to connect with you because we collaborate, again, across the state and beyond.
Thank you. One of the things, just hearkening back to the Clean Tech Entrepreneurship Energizer, this notion of patient capital and helping investors that might be new to the clean tech space or a little bit more hesitant that want to get into some of these game-changing technologies to help educate them about the types of capital investments and the timelines is really important. And using some of the references from some of the other biotech is a great example that allows you to really speak to that analogous long-term type investment.
If I could add one more comment too. So if you're not familiar with angel capital or venture capital, maybe for some of you all that have early stage ideas. So angel capital are usually individuals. So they're angels, right? They believe in your mission, they believe in your work, but they are looking for a return, right? So sometimes that can be, a 3x, a 5x return in, a few years. Again, going back, that's the patient capital, right? They want quick capital. They want a quick return. That's probably not going to be, or that may or may not be an option for you in the clean tech space, along with the biotech space. Not that they don't exist, they're just kind of few and far between. Same thing with venture capital, right? They want perhaps it's a bigger investment, but maybe a 10, 20x, again, maybe a little bit, past 5 years for a return. But again, it's tricky to find that patient capital, folks that are willing to hold on until you're successful, especially going through a regulatory process.
Mm-hmm.
So just to add on the patient capital, a lot of people thought 8 Rivers was nuts because we said we're going to invent a new kind of power plant. And clearly, if you're going to build a 550 megawatt thermal world scale new kind of power facility, that the lead time for return on that investment is easily 10, 15 years before you actually see the first commercial deployment. Between that, you're going to spend $500 million. So that's really difficult. And early days went to a lot of venture groups. And the other way to think about your businesses, if there's anybody in here who is an entrepreneur, is to think vertically integrated. So if you were to vertically integrate your company, everything from sourcing the first piece of material that needs to be refined that goes into your product, and then who buys it and who benefits from it, and looking at that vertical stack and starting to target the organizations who benefit if you sell 1 million of your product, right? That organization might be interested. If you look at Occidental Petroleum, that's what they did with carbon engineering, right? Carbon engineering consumes a tremendous amount of potassium hydroxide. They're the second largest producer in the world of potassium hydroxide. So kind of these strategic investors I've found to be the more patient capital. And also the venture groups tend to, the big venture groups, and they've told us this because we were going to them for capital, have said, if we would have given you capital, you would have been dead 8 years ago. Because we would have said, you know what, we just need to cut our, we need to cut our losses and just figure dissolve this thing and figure it out. Because it's not going fast enough. It's not hitting our return milestones. And sometimes the larger corporate entity. Now, that capital is harder to access because to really get the focus that you need, you definitely don't start with middle management, right? You have to access the CEO and the C-suite, and that's difficult. But you follow conferences, see where they're speaking, stand outside, stalk them. I've done these kinds of things, right? Walk and talks are a huge opportunity where you can find time as they're leaving the building to pitch them on the idea. And that's where you have to have the practice of the elevator pitch down. And you have to do that over and over and over and refine it and have people tell you why it's horrible and rewrite it and rethink your whole idea over and over and over again. It's just that repetition, but it's just constant work, right? If you're not prepared for constant work, none of it matters. That's why there's not capital for people who don't find capitals, because they're not ready for that cycle of no's. You have to be ready for that. You have to be persistent. But
that's great, Damian. And I don't know if you all have engaged in this. I know that there are many who support this type of thing, but I know we used to do elevator pitch training, and a great thing to do is film yourself or have someone else film you and see that, because we're super uncomfortable. And what we would do is we would have teams. I actually had the whole staff could volunteer and evaluate the students, and we were all invested in their success. And they would get evaluations, 4 or 5 evaluations, go back and do at least 2 more rounds. And that was just at the beginning. That was just to be able to communicate, here's what I want to do with my life, right? Let alone a company that you're trying to get money for, where you truly have a couple of floors of an elevator at most, right? So thank you. Again, I feel like, this is such good synergy. Okay, Trish, can you share any insights about what might be coming from NREL and the federal level in terms of technology trends and priorities?
I think
Spill the tea for us.
I think if you've been at this conference, you've heard most of it.
Fair enough.
I don't need to. I mean, you can see from where the money's being deployed in advanced nuclear, clean hydrogen, long duration storage. Those are the hot topics of the day. NREL itself, I would say, just for interest's sake, if you think of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, you're probably thinking wind and solar. And yes, we've been involved in that for a very long time. But we actually have 3 key initiatives that we've been working on the past 10 years. And you may not know those. One is related to integrated systems, which basically is the grid of the future. So how are we going to deal with this grid that has to be bidirectional? And how are we going to deploy distributed energy along that grid is a big part of the research and work that we do there. The other is what we call electrons to molecules, and you heard a little bit about that earlier today if you went to the keynote. So how do we get cheap electrons to be used in order to create molecules that you'll need for fuels that we can't use electricity for. So think of sustainable aviation fuel and those sorts of things. And then the third big area is the circular economy. So we've been doing a lot of work in plastics upcycling and those sorts of things, as well as thinking about solar panels and wind turbine blades and all of that. When you make them and then they fall apart someday, can we recycle them? How do we begin with the end in mind with that? So those are the big trends of what we're doing. And then I would say that the very last one is more analysis. So we've been tapped more and more on the analysis that we do at NREL, especially for communities. So you can think of the LA 100. If you haven't heard of that study, you should go look it up. LA 100 study that we did. LA wanted to look at the roadmap or scenarios of how do they get to 100% renewable by 2045? And so NREL took that on. And if you want to see what that looks like, it's online and you can read all about it.
Thanks, Trish. I was going to say we have time for a couple of questions before we'll wrap up. I saw one down here. We've got a runner.
Thanks. Michael Shore, my company's Next Power 360, and it is a technology company that's high impact, gigaton carbon reduction potential, but certainly not in a hot topic area like storage or batteries or even ag tech. So do you have advice? Is the advice different for technology that is not getting highlight attention that some of the technologies are that we're talking about at this conference?
From my perspective, the technologies that aren't the hot topic. So we certainly weren't a hot topic, right? We're in clean energy and we're talking about engaging with all hydrocarbons. But unfortunately, because nobody's done that, engaged with hydrocarbons and believe that they could be used cleanly, we're in a position today where we have more renewables deployed than ever before and higher CO2 emissions than ever before. Nobody actually wanted to physically interact with the CO2 molecule. You can't just, right? And so I think that when you're in a space, and I don't know specifically what it does, and I could probably give you more advice on this afterwards, because this is my expertise, but when you're in a space that isn't a hot topic, I think that's a tremendous growth opportunity. When you can build a business, because if you make that bet, and our bet was that hydrocarbons were going to be around for a long, long time, and so somebody better focus on cleaning them up, and so let's focus on that. And everybody questioned us all the way through till 2017, 2018. And then everything, the light switch really flipped on recently for us. And there's tremendous growth potential when you're focused in an area that isn't a hot topic, and then it becomes one, and you've been in that space for long enough, because now you're really the most mature established player to offer a solution. So, I mean, I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah.
I agree, and I have. From the perspective of an investor, I actually think that I'm investing in future of food, and I'm specifically in the alternative, what today we call alternatives, right? And with the journalism now saying that it's all over and done, like I actually think the people who stay to build at the moment in the areas that are just post the Gartner hype cycle, that post the bubble burst, those are the ones who are going to come up real strong in the next cycle, in the next bubble, because we are cyclical beings. Like this planet is a cyclical thing. So everything has its own time. It's as long as you believe, and as long as you believe that this is something that needs to exist in the world. And at some point, hopefully the world thinks the same thing. Just keep going.
The other bit of advice that I've found to be interesting is sometimes to bridge the valley of death. And this is something, our valley of death spanned 6 years. It was really a really large crevasse. But to bridge that, sometimes you have to get creative and you have to build businesses that allow your primary business to succeed. So sometimes if you have a product that's going to take a long time to develop, the question I always ask myself with my team is, what resources do we have internally that we could monetize that are valuable to the world, that will help us progress our technology but provide a benefit, right? And so what I noticed through, and I'll get specific because sometimes that helps and you can apply it to whatever makes sense, but what I noticed is through our due diligence process, we were giving, whenever they were diligencing our technology, we were giving them tremendous information about the carbon capture market. Pipelines, where to sequester, why it's good, how to convert it, what it can convert into, what's the energy intensity for that conversion. And I said, what the hell? I said, guys, I think we can charge people for this. And they said, nobody's going to pay us to do due diligence on our technology. And that's one of our largest revenue streams today as we get onto our licensing business, is people are paying us to engineer our solutions for them. And we keep all the IP. Yeah. And so that's an example of how do you create revenue in your existing expertise within your business. Yes, you're hyper focused on developing that product, but sometimes you have to build a business to build the business.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So we are at, I think we're okay if we go a little over. We do have another keynote coming in here afterwards, but I saw a question down front. I think we can take one more. We have a Oh, sorry, Balu, I didn't realize you had already.
Sorry, I already got the mic. Very interesting discussion. And I kept hearing this both from Krista and Trish, that engaging the stakeholders early on in the entrepreneurial idea is a very key aspect of it. I would also like to hear from you that many times I notice the sectoral strategy partnership, including a state agency, educational partner, industry, the peer industries involvement and all. That's how I saw most of the partnerships. I would like to hear from you, how much value do you see to also bring in the local governments, especially like a local economic development agency or workforce or a center for the entrepreneurial research? How much value do you see to bring them early on in that?
Sure. So thank you for your question. So if I heard you correctly, it's how much value is there on bringing in the local, perhaps even economic development organization or so on. And to be quite frank, we actually collaborate very closely with our local economic development organizations. We see them as a key partner in the work that we do, supporting the innovators and entrepreneurs and making those connections, make sure that our entrepreneurs are connected locally that way, because they have a good pulse on the market. They have a good pulse on industry clusters that are burgeoning. They have a lot of resources and personal connections. They also have a lot of information on any type of could be tax abatements, any type of job creation incentives, things like that. That can be really helpful for a startup company. So I absolutely think that they are wonderful partners and a critical piece for most businesses. Maybe not all, but absolutely, I think that they can be very valuable.
Thank you. And we've got one more. Do you have a mic? Oh,
hello. Oh, hi.
One more quick question.
Okay, quick question. This is a little specific for Damian, just because I know a bit about 8 Rivers, but you all have a lot going on at the company, right? You have like, I don't know how many patents, or you're trying to commercialize dozens of technologies growing really fast. How do you know if you're growing too fast as a company?
You're asking him that? Have we not learned who he is?
I don't know that we've ever really given that much thought. I mean, maybe that's a problem we run into. But for a long, for a lot of the years, it's never been that, are we growing too fast? We've always been even raising, we typically raise $50 to $100 million at a time. And even in doing that, the question is always, okay, are we going to raise the next tranche of funding? I would say on growth, my biggest concern in growth at 8 Rivers hasn't been so much around the technology, because the technology, it ultimately takes time, and there's kind of a dictated path on how that happens. The bigger issue in growing too fast is if you grow a team too quickly. My concern is if we grow a team too quickly and we become too bureaucratic within our organization, too compartmentalized, we lose the cross-pollination of people who aren't domain experts throwing out wild ideas that may make absolutely no sense, but within the idea, there may be something very valuable that we can extract and use. So that's one. You lose the culture of the organization. That's one concern. The other is that if you grow a team too quickly, you're not really letting the personalities settle to understand who will be good fits. You're taking a lot of personalities all at once and putting them in a room together, and that can be a disaster. So that's the biggest risk. Once you have access to large amounts of capital and you can grow your team, or revenue's increasing, it's how do you grow the team appropriately such that you can keep an innovative culture. At least for us, that's very important. Now, in other organizations, right, you're going to have certain functions that, it's just accounting, or it's just this or just that. But, for us, we like our accountant to also have expertise in other areas where he can provide more value than just the accounting job. Kind of the autodidact polymath, if you will, people who teach themselves but know a lot about a plethora of subjects. So for us, that's my biggest concern about growing too fast is the rate of hiring. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And we just did 212% growth in the past 8 months. So it's been a concern. That's why it's on my mind, I guess.
Well, Audience, please join me in thanking our amazing panelists. Sorry. That is right here. If we could have the one sentence, the one thought you would like everyone to leave with today, Damian.
Oh, you're gonna start. Okay. I'm going to go back to a common theme. It's one of my favorite things, and that's persistence. Is the most important trait, I think, in any entrepreneur. To be persistent allows you to accomplish a lot.
So I'll say, if we want progress for clean tech, then that requires change, and change requires risk, specifically calculated risk. So don't be afraid to take those risks. Surround yourself with a community of support, and lots of folks here are ready and willing to support you on your endeavor. But it does take risk to make progress.
Got it. I would say I love the persistence comment, but I'd also say fail fast. I think that's very important. And then get up and take your learnings and go take a risk.
And I would like to contribute that everything is cyclical. So whatever cycle you're in, there will be a next one.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us today.